Are you a fan of magic? Want to wow your friends with incredible spells, but can't quite get a grasp on the sleight of hand? Well then, perhaps it's time to toss out that deck of cards and start with something a little more fictional. Hogwarts Legacy is a game that was released to the masses in the year 2023 to booming success, probably spurned on by people like this.
I'm your biggest fan, and thank you for giving me a purpose in life.
Yes, this franchise has some die-hard fans that it would appear are known as Potterheads. I don't know. I've seen the movies, and that Wormtail's cute and all, but I think I'll find my life purpose elsewhere. Probably find one somewhere in the toy aisle. Anyway, our story begins with our created character standing beside a horseless buggy, talking with a man named Professor Fig before being interrupted by another man named George Osric. They share a couple pleasantries and pile into a cart heading off to Hogwarts, their departure garnering the attention of a fancily dressed fellow who apparates before we can see his face. Following the air road, George asks who exactly we are and why we're with Professor Fig. A question I'm equally interested in, but unfortunately it seems that life began only just before boarding this carriage, and so we'll have to establish some backstory for ourselves. Let's see here. If memory serves, I live in my cousin's pantry. My parents abandoned me to live with them when I was very little, and I've grown up in absolute luxury because they love me a whole lot. I got this scar during a stint in juvie after selling house elves on the black market. Oh, and I can speak to woodpeckers. I think they call that pecker tongue in the wizarding world? I'm not sure. Regardless, Fig tells Osric that we're joining Hogwarts as a new student in the 5th year. An occurrence that's unheard of, but I guess we're just that awesome. However, interesting as that may be, Osric has something else on his mind.
Have you seen this?
A goblin named Ranrock has recently been making waves in the wizarding world for starting a so-dubbed rebellion. The Ministry of Magic, essentially the government of wizardkind and Osric's employer, doesn't believe him to be a threat, but Osric's not so sure. He tells Fig that it was his recently deceased wife Miriam that had alerted him to the dangers to begin with, a revelation that immediately perks up the ears of an obviously still grieving Fig. She'd sent Osric a strange goblin metal container that neither he nor Fig seemed capable of figuring out. But
What's that glow? I don't see a glow.
Fortunately for them, though, they got the MC. And we've got magic these yokels can't even dream of. Fig hands us the container and we pop it open without even trying, much to the surprise of our elder contemporaries. It's just too bad that before we can catch the praise...
We do.
Oh no! Osric! A dragon appears out of nowhere to devour our well-groomed compatriot, but hey, at least we can now see Thestrals. The fiery beast preps another attack, but we manage to jump out of the way, falling through the air with the container and the key within falling alongside. Taking the hand of Fig, his quick thinking saves us as the key turns out to be a port key. Key's a key, who could have guessed? I suppose it'd be hard to shove a boot in that tiny little box though. The magical item takes us to Squirrel Skull Island, where we finally get to actually have some control. Fig questions what a dragon was doing around these parts, let alone why it would have attacked our cart for no reason, but we've got more pressing matters to attend to, like sightseeing. We search around the island for a bit, enjoying the views and grappling with a few tutorials, before finding another glowing object, this time a wall. Interacting with it somehow sends us to Gringotts of all places, and we wake a sleeping goblin who's startled to have a visitor. He asks for our key, and we follow him to vault number 12, getting a little Gringotts history lesson as we ride the familiar goblin cart things from the movies. Along the way, we run into a particularly surly goblin security officer, and our character takes note of his armband as its glow reminds us of the collar worn by the dragon during the attack. Arriving on location, we're granted access to the chamber, but it appears to be empty. Another scan revealing a door which leads to a vast cavernous chamber. We learn a couple spells, sift through some tutorials, and stumble through our first experiences with combat, before eventually finding a magical artifact known as a pensieve. I'm going to assume anyone watching this has seen or read Harry Potter, so you'll recognize most of these objects from the movies. Anyway, we shove our faces into some magical liquid and consume the memories of two interesting looking chaps who seem to have created this place to begin with. They speak of an ancient magic, of vast powers that can only be harnessed by someone who completes their trials. At the moment, this doesn't really mean all that much, but we can see traces of ancient magic, so it would appear that we've been prophesied. Unfortunately, before Professor Fig gets the chance to drop to his knees and worship at our greatness, Ranrock arrives to spoil the fun, popping up with what has to be in the running for the most unimposing posse of baddies I think I've ever seen. A standoff ensues as the Goblin Rebel wants what we found here, but his Gringotts companion isn't too keen on breaking the bank's rules for this altercation.
Choose your next words wisely.
A dutiful job dedication that gets the Goblin killed for his efforts. At least, I assume that's death. I don't know. Not quite as cut and dry as Avada Kedavra, but at the very least, he's gonna have some wicked back pain when he wakes up. With such a callous disregard even for his own men, Fig isn't too keen on striking up an alliance, but as a fight breaks out, it would seem that the Vault's architects were adverse to such violence. A massive stone construct coming to life and attacking the goblins as we sneak out through another conveniently placed ancient magic portal. I wonder how much it'd cost for me to get one of those installed that leads to the kitchen. Regardless, we managed to escape the 3-foot tyrant, winding up in the forest very near a certain school of witchcraft and wizardry, arriving just in time to be late. Fig tells us that snitches ain't witches, and we sit on down to answer a 2-question survey that will determine the fate of our entire wizarding lives. No pressure.
I detect a growing sense of ambition, an eagerness for power. Perhaps you belong in Slytherin.
And I'm in Evil House. Looks like a life of back alley business and muggle burnings for this old dog. But green is my favorite color, and the official Harry Potter website seems to confirm the hat's suspicion, so I suppose we'll go with it. House chosen, the headmaster says a few words to kick off the school year to uproarious applause. Or rather, he tells everyone that this Quidditch season has been cancelled to belabored moans. And with that, we're enrolled. Deputy Headmistress Weasley, one of the few names you'll likely recognize around here, taking the time to show us to our common room. It's got a much more interesting door design than the fat lady those silly lion heads have, and we get some shut-eye after a day I think could very easily be classed as overwhelming. Starting fresh the next morning introduces us to several of our fellow Slytherins. There's a boy named Sebastian Sallow who seems to already be hinting at a good bit of rule-breaking. I see good things in his future. Then there's a girl named Imelda, an overly competitive broom lover, and finally Ominous Gant, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin himself, but he isn't exactly proud of the connection. Also, he appears to be blind. I've never understood how eyesight works in the Harry Potter universe. They've got spells or tonics to completely regrow your bones from scratch, but haven't managed to tackle LASIK? I don't know. Having thoroughly introduced ourselves to our housemates, we rejoin Professor Weasley. She tells us about the academic pursuits we'll be striving towards and hands us a book, which explodes. She then shows us how to use this book to collect field guide pages, navigate the menus, and use the Flu Powder network for fast travel. However, this slew of tutorials doesn't come for free, as she wants to know what Fig's not telling her about the events that transpired after the dragon attack. Fortunately, Fig interrupts before she can pry the details from you, and he shows you how to use the game's map for marking locations. And with that, we finally get to actually attend our first class, Defense Against the Dark Arts, where we catch a glimpse of Sebastian absolutely smacking a lion head around like it's nothing.
Is that all you've got?
We're also introduced to the teacher of the classroom, a woman named Professor Hecat, as she gives a short little speech about the value of knowledge and teaches us how to cast Levioso. Fortunately, we pick it up quick as she immediately throws us into the Viper's Pit, and we have to duel Sebastian. He's top of the class, but no match for a day one protagonist, as we mop the floor with him. In fact, we're so awesome that he invites us to a special little dueling club and drops some hints that he's a bit of a bad boy.
If you want to get the most out of your time at Hogwarts, you're going to need to break the rules now and then.
Preaching to the choir, Sebastian. I am a fellow serpent, after all. With the first class now on the books, we head off to the second. This time we're in charm school, and we meet a rather charming young woman named Natty. Of course, she's a lion head, but I'll try my best not to hold it against her. She offers us a seat, and we indulge, before being introduced to Professor Ronan, a rather jolly fellow who decides to begin the semester with a review of the spell Accio. We pick it up quickly and catch some more praise for our prowess before Ronan decides to truly test our mastery with a little competition. We play this kind of reverse shuffleboard game against our new friend Natty, and she gets an absolutely perfect score. This game is rigged, and I hate it. She's cordial enough in her victory though, and as we return to the classroom, she gives us a little backstory on what brought her to Hogwarts. She tells us that she's originally from Wagadu, somewhere in Uganda.
Wagadu School of Magic is the largest wizarding school in the world.
Oh, that's funny, Natty, because I've never heard of it. There's only one school that matters in this wizarding world, and I'm standing in it. Although, I will admit that it appears your ludicrous claims seem to be canon, so fine. They don't even need wands to cast spells down in Africa, apparently, but I would bet they are seriously lacking in the scarf department, so we'll call it even. Anyway, the conversation eventually runs its course as we finished our first day of classes and reconvene with Professor Weasley. She asks us how the day went, informing us that we'll need to work extra hard to catch up to the other 5th years, and sends us off to go explore the town of Hogsmeade with Natty as our companion. She also mentions 2 names that will play large roles in the story moving forward, Victor Rookwood and Theophilus Harlow. We do a short little task for Ronan, which earns us Reparo, before joining Natty to go to Hogsmeade. The journey is filled with random banter about the area, hippogriffs, lacewing flies, and the Forbidden Forest. We also meet the Hogwarts caretaker, a man named Mr. Moon.
Pleasure. You might want to turn back, Miss On-Eye. Turn and run.
Real charmer. He seems sloshed, so we just ignore him and make our way into Hogsmeade to split up and do some shopping. We go to Tome and Scrolls for some spellcrafts, go to Ollivander's for a new wand, customized and beautiful, of course, head to J. Pippin's Potions to pick up some recipes, and finally to the Magic Neat to grab a couple of seeds. The whole escapade leaving our wallet quite anorexic, so we prepare to head back to the school with Natty. Unfortunately, our plans to depart are interrupted by none other than a...
In the dungeon! Turn around in the dungeon!
Luckily, some nearby adults manage to coerce it into chasing them away from the buildings, but unluckily, another one appears to make sure our first trip to Hogsmeade is a memorable one. It attacks as we join Natty for a boss fight, whipping spells and narrowly avoiding the thwack of its club. Eventually, we manage to tucker him out, popping him like a balloon with some ancient magic, before the grown-ups return to laud us as a savior, and ask us to perform some janitorial tasks. This hero thing isn't all it's cracked up to be, is it? Regardless, we help clean up the town, and as thanks, a particularly fancy gentleman gives us a new robe. Grazie. Fully fitted, we are now prepared to leave the town, but conversation down an alleyway catches our attention. How exactly Ranrock is in this town in broad daylight is beyond me, but he's berating a man who looks so much like Green Arrow to me that it's distracting. This Stephen Amell impersonator is none other than the Victor Rookwood mentioned by Professor Weasley earlier, and together with his underling Theophilus Harlow, the gang's all here to show off the bad guy unholy trinity. They catch us snooping, and so we take refuge inside of the 3 broomsticks. We meet the barkeeper, Sorona Ryan, sharing a quick exchange of dialogue before Rookwood and Harlow barge in looking for us. The patrons of the establishment manage to scare off the formidable duo as we, yet again, attempt to head back to the safety of the school, this time successfully. Another day in the books, we wake up to owl mail from Professor Fig, who wants us to meet him in his classroom, a request that we oblige. We tell him about the events at Hogsmeade, and he tells us that he suspects we may find something of interest in the restricted section of the library. Before we go looking, though, he'd like us to continue our classes. Now, how dangerous of a threat do you think Ranrock is if a scholastic achievement takes priority? I don't know, but I am a studious man if nothing else, and so we'll get the job done. Hecate gives us a couple of tasks revolving around the so-called Underground Dueling Club before teaching us a new spell, Incendio. Essentially, flamethrower the spell. With that completed, we return to Fig, but before he can take us book diving, the headmaster makes an unexpected request for his company, putting a damper on our plans and sending us into the arms of a more suspicious companion.
You mentioned being clever enough not to get caught in the restricted section.
And I am.
We tell Sebastian about our predicament, and he agrees to help us serpent sibling out. telling us to meet him after curfew, and once we do, teaching us a spell called Disillusionment. A spell that makes us nearly invisible to the naked eye, and we use it to sneak past a few prefects and a librarian before making it down to the restricted section where we unfortunately run into a ghost named Peeves. He's a bit of a prick and dresses like a bloated Mad Hatter. He floats off, threatening to tell the librarian of our intrusion, and Sebastian splits off in an attempt to mitigate the severity of our punishment. Now alone, we continue on, discovering some traces of ancient magic, before finding an entire underground dungeon, and at the end of it, a book and another pensive. This one containing 2 memories. The first of the 2 wizards from the vault, and 2 more of their companions, ending a drought and saving a young girl, boy, and their father from the ramifications of that. The second being the same young girl who's been accepted into Hogwarts as a 5th year. Dialogue suggesting that she also has the ability to sense ancient magic. She shares this ability with Professor Rackham, the Dumbledore-looking one, and she asks if she'll be able to wield it. A question that bears some worry from the group, but they tell her maybe, and she leaves. The deeper ramifications of these 2 events lost on our character as we leave the restricted section just in time to see Sebastian get apprehended by the librarian. Fortunately, the man's a true Slytherin, telling the librarian that he came alone, taking all the heat and earning my undying loyalty. For now, though, it's time to inform Fig of our discoveries. We tell him of our unsightly invasion and hand him the book, which he immediately mulls over for clues. He discovers that there are pages missing and informs us that he'll take the book to London to inspect as the headmaster wants him to explain Osric's death to the Ministry of Magic, his upcoming absence leaving us the task of finding out what we can about the missing pages. But enough of the plot. I want to learn about plants.
This year will be filled with enchantment and excitement, but the most important thing cultivated in herbology is knowledge.
Oh, hell yeah! First day mandrake moans, baby. We do some gardening, learning about how to plant seeds and properly toss a cabbage, before continuing our academic efforts, this time in potions class. We meet Professor Sharp, brew a Wiggenweld potion, and then are asked to brew an Erdis potion. Sharp telling us that we can borrow some ingredients for the time being from his personal stock. However, someone else is interested in that stock, Gareth Weasley, nephew to Professor Weasley and a noted troublemaker. He asks us to grab a Fwooper feather while we're in there, and being the people pleaser that we are, we decide to acquiesce.
Wait, it's not supposed to. Ah!
Get it!
Dragon Dung! What happened?
He brews fireworks? But apparently our Edurus potion is a success, Sharp giving us a mild scolding but a passing grade, and so we leave the classroom to owl mail from a house elf named Scrope. Apparently he's left a letter in the courtyard, and picking it up suggests he may have a lead on our missing book pages. We follow his breadcrumbs and eventually meet him down by the beach as he informs us that he works for Headmaster Black and gives us a proposition. He believes that his former mistress, Apollonia Black, took the pages to her secret grotto before she died 50 years ago. He also believes that she took a family heirloom of a ring down there and asks if we could find both. We agree, heading off to the location, but instead of finding either, we find a ghost of a former student named Jackdaw. These freaking names, dude, I swear. Richard Jackdaw tells us that he sold the ring ages ago and that he died with the pages on his body in the Forbidden Forest. Fortunately, he agrees to show us where he died, and so we head in that direction, informing Scrope along the way that he's out of luck. Before we can go cave diving for Jackdaw's body, however, we need to learn Expelliarmus from Professor Hecat. Easy enough, as the requirement is just a classroom montage. If only high school were this easy. With the spell learned and mastered, we head off to Jackdaw's tomb, ready for anything. Except spiders. Yeah, these overleveled spiders absolutely kicked my can for like a half hour. It was depressing. Anyway, we eventually find the location, solve a few simple puzzles, eradicate an entire spider civilization, and discover Jackdaw's long-dead body at the mouth of another ancient magic temple. A path that eventually leads us to none other than the man from our pensive dreams, Percival Rackham.
I recognize you from the Pensives. You're Professor Rackham.
I am indeed.
We chat with the painting for a bit, but unfortunately he won't divulge much information without us bringing the book back to this chamber. So, we leave to retrieve it from Professor Fig, who's in London, discovering that, shockingly, the map chamber was underneath Hogwarts the whole time. The sheer scale of this place, not to mention the hidden rooms, must drive the house elf janitors absolutely batty. Anyway, since Fig's out of town, I guess, what, broomstick classes?
Now, let's see how well everyone kept up with their practice over the summer holidays.
We learn even more mechanics that this game has, this time how to fly, and this is going to shock you, but we're a natural. Once again getting a bit too chummy with these scholastic troublemakers, and catching another small scolding from our unsanctioned escapades. What can I say? Peer pressure's a real thing. With flight school completed, we catch an owl from Weasley, who requests we meet her in the 7th floor corridor. Heading up reveals the Room of Requirement and introduces us to a house elf named Deke. It also introduces us to what is essentially the player's house for the game, since the room opens up for customization and everything your little heart could possibly desire. There's a lot you could do in here to make the place pristine and beautiful, but if you're like me, you'll probably just plop down a few potion sets, some planting tables, call it a day. Deke sticks around to give you the option to toggle the ambiance, and we leave to catch back up with our blood brother, Sebastian. Is that a glitch in your cloak, or you just happy to see me, my man? We tell him that our trip to the restricted section was fruitful, and he tells us that it's best not to speak out in the open, leading us to a hidden away place that not even the teachers know about. God, I hope that was a cloak glitch. Arriving at the Undercroft, Sebastian opens up about how he found this place, telling us that it was found by our fellow Slytherin, Ominous Gaunt, and that we mustn't tell him about our knowledge of it. He also mentions his twin sister Anne. Something happened to her, but he doesn't really get into it. Then he teaches us what is perhaps the most useful spell we're gonna get in this game, Confringo, essentially Fireball.
That's it!
Spell learned and tested, we return to Sebastian, who tells us a bit more about his sister, inviting us to visit her with him the next time he returns home to Feldcroft, and warning us about his bitter Uncle Solomon, her caretaker. In kind, we give him some information about what we've been up to, Goblin King War and that whole jazz, before leaving with one more warning about keeping this from Ominous. Well, son of a bitch.
You there? I can hear you.
Oh, hello, Ominous. I was just heading to our common room.
I've recognized that voice. You're the new 5th year. Did you just come from the Undercroft?
We have disgraced the pure-blooded bonds of Slytherin. Ominous is equally unamused by our treachery, and we leave the Undercroft for the first time in shame. Fortunately, Fig owls in to take our mind off our betrayal, telling us that he's returned from London and wishes to speak with us. We catch him up to speed on what's been going on while he's been gone, and lead him to the map chamber, placing the book down and revealing a map in the floor. Probably why they call it the map chamber. Who knew? Rackham returns to his portrait and tells us that, now that we've returned the book, we can begin 4 trials to access the magic that he and his 3 companions locked away long ago. He tells us that it will be a long and arduous process, and Fig tells him that we're kind of on a timetable here, because Ranrock is currently trying to brute force his way to this magic and dry hump the world. Rackham wasn't expecting that. But speed isn't exactly his forte, so he sends us off to our first trial while he thinks. We meet Professor Fig at the tower that was said to contain the trial, and the place is absolutely swarming with goblins. Dispatching them by means of stealth, we search the area and eventually find a portrait of Rackham, who leads us to the entrance of the trial. We solve a couple puzzles and slap around some sentient rocks before finding another pensive holding yet more revealing memories. This one showing the girl from the last memory transfiguring the very world around her. It would seem that her brother died after they fixed the drought, and her father's losing a battle with depression at the loss. The girl, Isadora Morganac, wants to use her gifts with ancient magic to take away his pain, but Rackham advises against the idea. Another memory then playing as Isadora has become a teacher at Hogwarts and requests that her fellow professors join her for dinner at her home in Feldcroft. The revelations ending on that cliffhanger, as if it's not apparent where this is going. The first trial complete, we return to the map chamber with Charles Rookwood now joining his painted partner. We share pleasantries, but for now, there's oil-based deliberation to be done, as Rackham sends us off while he discusses the goblin situation with his companion. We recount what we saw in the Pensive to Fig, and tell him that we may be able to gain some goblin insight from a friendly goblin that we saw leaving the Three Broomsticks the other day. He tells us to follow the lead, and we head off. First though, fall approaches. Pumpkin time, baby. Festive cheer achieved, we remember that. Wait a minute, isn't this a school? So we decide to actually attend class once or twice. Starting with potions, we have a little learning montage, picking up Depulso, and then we head to Magical Beast class to learn yet more mechanics to add to our ever-expanding to-do list. This time we meet Professor Howen and a fellow student named Poppy Sweeting. With their help, we learn how to feed and brush magical beasts, then scare off some bad apples that are bothering a big cat.
Worried about a worthless little rodent?
Actually, cats are in the Felidae family of mammals, and they eat rodents, you silly primate.
That's really not funny.
Alright, well, nobody asked you, me. Howen scares off the do-batters, and we continue caring for the magical pets and bonding with Poppy. In fact, we've impressed her so much that she's decided to introduce us to her friend, a hippogriff named Highwing. We make quite the impression, and as Highwing leaves, Poppy tells us that she's worried about poachers in the area, vowing to see what they're plotting and telling us that she'll keep us posted if she finds anything out. With a new friend made, we head off to aid a few more of the helpless masses before finally going back to the Three Broomsticks to find out about Lodgok. Sirona tells us that he's likely at the Hogshead, and so we go check there, finding him curled up with a stout butterbeer. We chat for a moment, making an alliance through our shared trust in Sirona, and he tells us of a goblin relic that he'd like us to find. Lodgok used to be involved with Ranrock and his loyalist, but had a falling out some time back and thinks that presenting this relic to Ranrock will place him back in his good graces. We accept the task, following our 3-foot friend as we make our way to the tomb where the relic is buried. He talks a bit about the differences between wizard kind and goblins before sending us into the no doubt deadly burial ground alone. We solve a couple of puzzles and take on a new enemy type, Infurious, aka zombies, and eventually find out that this entire trip was for nothing, since Rookwood's men, the Ashwinders, have already absconded with the artifact. Lodgok fears that these damn dirty bandits are stealing his plans to get in good with Ranrock, and sends us off to steal back that which was stolen. We oblige, finding the thieves and slaughtering dozens, before finding the helmet and returning it to Lodgok.
Thank you. This should earn Ranrock's trust.
Don't mention it, Gobby. I aim to please. With the plan now in motion, we get an owl from Sebastian asking us if we're ready to go see Anne. A quick trip to Feldcraft revealing that she's been cursed, and also, Sebastian was right. His uncle? Kind of a prick. The trip doesn't go very well, as Solomon and Anne herself have already given up hope for the curse to be reversed, but Sebastian isn't quite prepared to take no for an answer. He wants to take us to the location where Anne was cursed, and we follow to discover a dig site of sorts that's crawling with goblins. Searching the area uncovers some interesting findings, but principal among them are the journal entries of Isidore Morganac and a path that leads directly to the Undercroft, the use of which creates a triptych in the room and reveals a runic note. We ask Sebastian if he has any idea what it means, and unsurprisingly, he does not. He did, however, recently learn of a scriptorium that was created by Salazar Slytherin from Ominous, a thread that he goes off to investigate as we catch back up with Deke and Professor Weasley. Seems the poachers in the area have become quite the problem, so they've decided that we need a magical animal catching bag, Deke hoping that we'll take this opportunity to begin conservation efforts around the greater school grounds, which is great and all, but can I get some extra credit for this or something? I've been to herbology like once, and to be honest, I'm not so sure I could tell the difference between a fluxweed and mallowsweet if you put a gun to my head. Unfortunately, it seems that Deke's not all that interested in our test scores, however, as he leads us out to catch a puffskein, a jobberknaw, and a mooncalf, bringing them all back to the Room of Requirement, where it creates a little animal sanctuary for them to scuttle around in. Oh, and harvest their hair and such for upgrades. Now, have I mentioned there's a lot of mechanics in this game? With the never-ending list of things to do ever expanding, we get an owl from Sebastian, who's been attempting to talk some sense into Ominous.
I can't agree. And I'll not say a word more. I'm sorry.
Unsuccessfully, might I add. We talked to Sebastian about why Ominous is so uptight about dark magic, and he tells us that when Ominous was a boy, he was forced by his family to use the Cruciatus Curse on Muggles, lest it be used on him. Since then, he's resented his family and sworn off dark magic, a decision that's currently hindering our plans for finding his ancestors' scriptorium. But enough about dark magic. Time for some stargazing, as we actually attend an astronomy class. It's by and large uneventful, but we do meet a plucky little Ravenclaw named Meat, and he gives us a hand-me-down telescope so that we can do yet more collectibles work in the greater Hogwarts area. It's not magical busy work, it's necessary for our studies. With the universe now our optical play toy, we attend another herbology class with Professor Garlic, which earns us the spell Wingardium Leviosa. Then we also attend divination class, which is taught by Natty's mother and grants us the spell Descendo. I think Deke might have told Weasley my complaints because schoolwork's just flying out of the woodwork at this point. Anyway, with our scholastic itch scratched, we get an owl from Natty who wants us to meet her for some snooping. Seems our run-in with Rookwood and Harlow has reminded her of men that she fled in Uganda, and she wants to bring them to justice so as to take back some of the peace of mind that she lost from fleeing. We agree to assist her in this endeavor, opening a gate and finding that... Hi, Wing! You limey poaching bastards are so lucky that I haven't learned Avada Kedavra. We split off from Natty as she goes to search for evidence that will implicate Harlow and Rookwood with a crime, while we attempt to free our majestic bird horse. This leads to some puzzles and some combat, before we eventually find Highwing and her buddy, nameless Jeff, chained up in the tower. Natty also appears just in the nick of time as we free our newfound companions and ride off into the sunset. Once we land, we find that Natty was successful, vowing to hand off the evidence to Officer Singer and get into contact once she knows more. We see her off, now with a new mount. I kinda prefer the classics though, so into the bag you go, buddy. With a bird horse now safely tucked away in our pocket, Natty immediately gets back into contact with us, and we head off to meet her in Lower Hogsfield. She's heard that a man named Mr. Bickle supposedly has more evidence against Harlow, and she'd like us to accompany her meeting with him.
We're looking for Mr. Bickle.
My husband is dead.
Well, that kinda sucks. The widow Bickle informs us that Harlow killed her husband, and now her son Archie is also missing. We offer our finely tuned investigatory services, using Revelio every 5 seconds, and eventually come to the conclusion that Archie's been kidnapped by Harlow's men. Following his trail leads to a giant tent building, and they have the young lad in a cage. We bring him back to his mother, solidifying that this Harlow guy is kinda mean. But that's about enough time with Natty. I think Fig's getting lonely as he's taken up to lengthy conversations with the map chamber paintings. We interrupt his new pastime and catch him up to speed on the whole Lodgok situation. Rookwood deciding that we've waited the appropriate amount of time to begin the next trial. We also inform him that his descendant is a bird-horse torturing sadist, but he doesn't have much to say about it.
My descendant? A dark wizard? I'm afraid we've no time to waste.
Push away those harsh realities, why don't you, Charles? At any rate, before we head off to Rookwood Castle, we decide to check back in with Sebastian. Seems he's made no headway with Ominous, but it's nothing a little silver-tongued protagonist can't fix. 30 seconds with Ominous, and we manage to get him past those nasty little family traumas, convincing him that dark magic will be good for Sebastian. Salazar Slytherin's scriptorium can't be that bad, can it?
I see what you've done here, and I confess, you've convinced me.
What can I say? Sometimes you don't need charms class, just a bit of charm. We light a few sconces that unlocks this ancient hidden-away marvel. We tangle with several snake-related puzzles and find a couple of notes from Ominous's aunt who went missing after trying to locate this place. However, our journey is quickly stifled when we get into a self-closing corridor, with the only escape seeming to be the casting of the Cruciatus Curse. Ominous wants nothing to do with it, but luckily Sebastian's been dabbling in the dark arts and knows the curse already. He offers to teach it to us, and we accept, but When it comes down to who will endure the torture, we can't let our boy suffer like that.
Crucio!
That's it? I've had longer struggle sessions from stubbing my toe. Anyway, we find Salazar's old spellbook and catch an earful from Ominous before going our separate ways. Turning our attention back to the matter of the Second Keeper trial, we head off to Rookwood Castle and overhear a conversation between Victor Rookwood and Ranrock. Seems it's not all sunshine and rainbows in the Alliance of Evil. Ranrock is angry that Rookwood's been unable to capture the child, i.e. us, and Rookwood's unhappy that he has little leverage in the relationship, as well as the fact that Ranrock's been undermining him. An interesting insight into their dynamic, but for now we take out an oodle of goblins and find what appears to be the source of Ranrock's great power. Some red magical broken thing. Not really sure what it is yet, but the picture of Rookwood seems very disturbed. He leads us to the next trial, filled with what we've come to expect. Puzzles, and rock warriors. We work through them all at the pace of a protagonist prodigy before finding yet another pensive in the heart of the location. This time, the memory is of the dinner mentioned at the end of the last. Isadora welcomes in her Hogwarts colleagues before bringing out her father and sucking out his pain through his chest. Rackham is quite disturbed at the prospect, but both Isadora and her father seem elated, the memory ending as he thanks her for the relief. Returning to the map chamber, we meet yet another member of the Keepers, this time Neve Fitzgerald, former headmistress of Hogwarts, who introduces herself and tells us that she'll need some time to prepare the next trial. Shocker. With that, we decide to take a well-earned nap, the seasons changing once more, this time to Happy Christmas. Waking up to owl mail from Poppy, she's discovered something about the increased poacher activity around the area. We head off to meet her, and she tells us about a place she's heard of called Horntail Hollow. She'd like us to come investigate it with her, and as we head off, we run into some centaurs who aren't too friendly. They're of little consequence, though, as we arrive to Horntail Hollow to find that it's actually an underground dragon fighting ring. I mean, I'm not advocating for this, but I'm just saying. Pretty cool. Poppy's a little less impressed, however. In digging deeper into the location, we find a dragon egg, which seems better in our hands, as well as a newly captured dragon. The Ashwinder's attempting to break it, but I'm not so sure that it's working. Oh, shoulda been watching more DreamWorks movies, my man. We help the dragon escape its confines, and it absolutely decimates the building, probably taking out a few poachers along the way and sending us fleeing for our lives. Poppy theorizes that the egg we found likely belongs to that beast, and so we make plans to return it once she finds out where it actually lives. Those efforts on pause, we do a few lesser tasks, such as attending another magical beast class, helping out Natty talk to her mother about our recent untoward escapades, and attending Professor Weasley's class for the first and only time this entire school year. A few more academic credits under our belts, we get an owl from Sebastian, who's been researching into the triptych we found in the Undercroft, believing he's found something of interest in an old catacomb near Feldcroft.
I believe one of Slytherin's students stumbled upon the relic during an assignment to study sarcophagi in this catacomb.
Catacomb.
If it's in this catacomb...
Catacomb.
I'm ready to explore the catacomb.
Okay, what the actual...
I'll be interested to compare what lies inside to what I've read about this catacomb.
Fine. We enter the catacomb, killing a good number of spiders and solving some bone-related puzzles before, out of nowhere, Sebastian offers to teach us another unforgivable curse, this time Imperious. Starting to wonder if my blood brothership with this guy was a good call. But, hey, what are you gonna do? We agree to some dark magic education, practicing the curse on a few spiders until we finally find the devil relic that we've been looking for. We're starting to get cold feet, but Sebastian is not. He pockets the relic just in time for Ominous to show up out of nowhere and confront us. It's awkward. Fortunately, our silver tongue has been sharpened, and we manage to assuage Ominous into letting us go free. Not exactly what I wanted to happen. Starting to feel like we might have a dead Sebastian at the end of this, but that's how it worked out. Escaping the catacomb, though, we see that, in the distance, something's happening in Feldcroft. Arriving to find that it's under attack by Ranrock loyalists. A conflict that we jump headfirst into, but not one that sees us getting the pats on the back of a hero that we'd hoped.
Imperium!
Oh, keep that to the catacombs, buddy. Sebastian saves his sister, but since it was an unforgivable curse, there's no thank you. Anne's shocked and Solomon's pissed. He forbids his nephew from coming anywhere near Feldcroft again, threatening to get a hold of the Hogwarts headmaster if he hears anything of Sebastian using dark magic. We return to our serpent sibling with the bad news, and he's none too thrilled. Unfortunately, he doesn't take it as a wake-up call, but rather a call to rebellion against his uncle, vowing to save his sister, no matter what. Little heavy. I think maybe we should take a break from all this sister talk and take our friend on a nice, calming, goblin-murdering vacation. Following a clue from the triptych, we arrive at an old goblin-infested mine and battle about 1 million of the little buggers as we explore. The search eventually leads us to another of Isadora's old hangouts, where we find more documents and another piece of the triptych. Placing it into the magical art piece, Sebastian immediately recognizes it as a picture of the coast. He offers to take us there, but we tell him we should wait, hoping that Lodgok will be able to supply us some information that will help us get ahead of Ranrock's planning. Sebastian's a bit taken aback, considering he hates goblins, believing it to be one of them that put the curse on his sister. Our truthfulness resulting in an argument, as our companion seems to think we're being naive. Yeah, I think I've had enough of Sebastian for a while. Let's talk to someone a little more upbeat.
I didn't keep you waiting, did I?
Not at all.
While we've been dealing with an ever more belligerent housemate, Poppy's been busy tracking down the unleashed dragon, managing to pinpoint her location and asking if we can accompany her in an attempt to return the stolen egg. We agree, arriving on the scene and finding that she's not exactly thrilled to see us. Thank goodness for this ghost dodge roll, or I think we'd be serving this egg charred. Luckily, after a good bit of evasion, we managed to return what was stolen, the mother being so happy that she doesn't even eat us. I've heard that can be considered as a form of gratitude among this species. Poppy's pumped that we've managed our goal, but questions why the poachers haven't tried attacking us since the fighting ring, a question that leaves her worried as she begins to suspect that they've gone after her grandmother for retaliation. Fortunately, we're an orphan, or something, so we don't have those issues. Another side character left on the rocks, we get an owl from Lodgok letting us know that his attempts to get back in with Ranrock have proven unsuccessful. He does have another plan to discover what Ranrock's been up to though, but first we'll need to find someone who speaks the goblin language, gobbledygook. Luckily, we know someone like that. Amit, the astrology major, who just so happens to know the language for reasons of the because variety. We find him, where else, and ask if he'd be willing to do some translating. He agrees, and we head off to meet Lodgok, who's less than impressed with the human butchering of his native language.
Oh, Bacalio.
Enough. Please do not tell me that was meant to be gobbledygook.
Woo! Let him down easy, man, my god. Still, Amit swears that his reading is better than his wordplay, so with the knowledge of likely plans held within, we enter the mine. Amit's a little unexperienced with practice instead of theory, but we manage to beat back the loyalist forces within and eventually find the plans of some kind of giant drill. Amit's had about enough adventure for one lifetime, and we take what we found back to Lodgok. The hypothesis being that Ranrock is planning to drill underground to the Keeper's repositories. And with that, we finally crested the mountain of questions and have come down the other side for the answers, as Lodgok decides it's exposition time. He tells us that he was once one of Ranrock's flunkies, having similar beliefs to his, until, while searching the Rookwood estate, he happened across a peculiar witch. Goblins and wizardkind have a tenuous relationship, but this witch was courteous, saw him as an equal, even confiding in him about her research. This witch was Miriam, Professor Fig's wife, and her reverence toward goblinkind shifted something inside of Lodgok. When he heard she'd been murdered, it snapped him from his hate that he'd been harboring, and in the deepest parts of his mind, he knew it was likely Ranrock that had killed her. These revelations leaving Lodgok in a somber mood, as he promises to get back in touch when he's found more of Ranrock's plans. For now, though, the next trial is ready. We head down to the map chamber to speak with the oil paintings once more, this time finding out that the former headmistress's trial is located... where else? In the headmaster's office. At least it's close by, but I don't think Black's going to be overly cooperative. We head to Fig with this information, also informing him that Lodgok was getting friendly with his wife.
I want to hear more of this, and in fact, I'd like to speak with Lodgok directly.
But for now, the trial takes priority. Fortunately, Fig has literally everything covered for no reason whatsoever. Finally, a character taking some initiative. He's brewed up a patch of Polyjuice Potion, knows we need to pry the password to the entrance out of Scrope, and even has a plan for distracting Headmaster Black. Not sure why he was so prepared for this, but I'm not about to start asking questions now. Give me that poison. Hey diddly Dack, looks like we're black. Somehow our voices even changed. I thought that was a downside, but apparently not according to Google. Guess that's what you get for not reading the source material. As Black, we traipse around the school grounds like we run the joint, pestering students and teachers alike as we make our way to the dining hall to find Scrope. We have an awkward conversation with the little guy and manage to learn the password just as the potion is about to wear off, using it on the enchanted staircase and entering the office to find Fitzgerald's portrait just where she said it'd be. She tells us to look for a book to appear in the antechamber. We do, and get sucked inside for a trial that is wholly unique from its counterparts. The trial taking the form of a semi-retelling of the story of the Deathly Hallows from the Harry Potter movies. We evade death with the use of an invisibility cloak, fight death with the use of the Elder Wand, and eventually find the Resurrection Stone, which leads to the Pensive Memory. This time, we join Isadora and Fitzgerald as they discuss the events from the dinner. Isadora has continued pursuing this relief from pain, finding out that she can store these excretions inside of a goblin silver construct. The excretions giving her a strange power, making her feel stronger each time she takes away someone's pain. Fitzgerald isn't quite comfortable with the prospect, so Isadora sucks out her pain and drinks it. What? Fitzgerald is equally disturbed, the memory ending as Isadora storms off, angry that the Keepers won't embrace the power that she's found. But if that power is drinking pain, I'm not sure I'd condone it myself. With another piece added to the puzzle, we return to the map chamber to meet the fourth and final member of the Keepers, Professor Sanbakar. He's cordial, but he doesn't trust us and must confer with the other Keepers before telling us where to find the fourth trial. It's a good thing Ranrock's also moving at the speed of a turtle, because I think a full school year? Kind of a long time, no? Regardless, we have another recap session with Fig before heading off to see if Poppy's managed to get into contact with her grandmother. She has, and as it turns out, her suspicions were correct, as the poachers had gone there searching. They trashed her place and managed to find notes that she was working on for a long thought to be extinct magical creature, the Golden Snidget. Grammy's notes were cryptic, but Poppy fears that the poachers could decipher them and destroy any hope of these Snidgets being restored. She wants to team up with the Centaurs for this task, the friendly man horses, but has to concoct a plan first. In the meantime, we head off to regroup with Sebastian along the coast, where he recognized from the triptych. He's calmed down a bit since our last interaction.
Either they don't trust you, or you don't care enough about Anne to ask the difficult questions.
You know what? Never mind. Why did you have to be so nice in the beginning, Sebastian? I should have been buddies with the broom rider. Regardless, we're here, so we fight off a bevy of Ranrock loyalists, eventually confront Sebastian about his sour attitude, and then beat back some eight-legged freaks. It's a long dungeon, but along the way we find a couple of documents from Isadora, who rehashes the pensive memories through her perspective. The final treasure being the last canvas for the triptych, which, once finished, reveals another pensive memory, this time from Isadora herself. The first memory is of an interaction she had with her father, promising to take away his pain. And I've gotta say, what a frickin' prick. Yeah, you lost your son, but becoming a voluntary mute to torment your still living daughter isn't gonna bring him back, buddy. Anyway, we watch the dinner scene again, and then we see Isadora meeting with a goblin named Bragbor, who was mentioned by Lodgok earlier. His journals are how Ranrock knows of the Keepers and the repositories. They discuss the construction of goblin silver to hold the pain magic, the memory ending on that partnership. When we return to the real world, Sebastian is floored by the potential for power that Isadora seems to have discovered. He wants us to talk to the Keepers about learning to control this pain-taking magic, believing that it could be used to help Anne. We, on the other hand, are left with questions. The triptych repaired should have given us a portrait for Isadora, but didn't. Our character theorizing that it's because of the burned picture back at her old estate in Feldcroft. Regardless, we agree to see what we can do for Sebastian's sake, but it's been a very long time since we've seen Natty. Perhaps it's time for a catch-up. She wants to meet outside of Hogsmeade, and so we head there to find that she's still all about taking down Theophilus Harlow. She's still hoping to do this the legal route, and wants to gather more evidence against him by talking to Mr. Bickle's fellow conspirators. We split off, her going to the Hogshead, and us going to track down Bickle's friends. We find Daisy Rabe to discover that her husband's been kidnapped. We find Otto Dibble to discover that he's being blackmailed. We find Augustus Filbert to discover that he's a big ol' wimp baby. Who we don't find, though, is Natty. She's not at the rendezvous point, nor is she at the Hogshead. All that can be spotted is her wand at the dock. Fearful of what could have happened to her, we begin to search, finding a trail leading under the pub. It appears to be an underground Ashwiner base, and we introduce ourselves before finding both Natty and Mr. Rabe locked up. We rescue them both, but when we take the information of the abduction to Officer Singer, well, she's worthless. Not sure if this is meant to be some kind of cutting commentary on the legal system, but I'm pretty sure a well-corroborated abduction is cause for a bit more concern than a "we'll get to it when we get to it." Not a legal scholar, though. I like to save my brain capacity for things like the Happy Days theme song. With another harrowing adventure under our scarf, we part ways with Natty and see what trouble Sebastian's got planned for us this time. He's somehow managed to convince Anne to speak with him again.
Sebastian, a lost relic from a catacomb which requires a dark sacrifice.
Well, when you put it like that, I think she may have a point, Seb, old buddy. Unfortunately, Sebastian is way past the point of reasoning. This is happening, and Anne can see the writing on the wall. She agrees to whatever ritual he has planned, as long as we can get Ominous on board, informing her brother that her uncle has plans to take her from Feldcroft as soon as possible. Sebastian is furious that his uncle would try and take Anne from him, but that just means we'll have to work faster to get the plan in motion. While we make those preparations, we attempt to track down Lodgok, who we were supposed to meet at the coastal mine. When we arrive, though, he's a no-show. Our hunch being that he attempted to infiltrate on his own. We follow to find that this place is absolutely crawling with Ranrock loyalists, whom we slaughter most brutally, before finally stumbling across Ranrock himself, giving a speech in a lower chamber. The drill that we learned about with the meat is now fully operational, so we destroy it, garnering the Goblin King's ire as we finally get another confrontation. As it so happens, we also run into Lodgok, who's been captured by Rookwood just outside the mine. A turn of events that finally brings the four main characters together and reveals that Lodgok and Ranrock are actually brothers. A happy family reunion that's celebrated with a nice magical punch. Seems that Lodgok had known the location of the final magic repository the entire time and was holding it from Ranrock. A brotherly betrayal that ultimately results in yet another, this time more devastating, magical punch.
You are a traitor to our kind!
No!
The punch kills Lodgok and is so intense that it begins to collapse the mine. Rookwood attempting to take advantage of the chaos and kill Ranrock, but misses, resulting in a break of their allegiance, and we escape in the confusion. Lamenting the loss of our friend Lodgok, we manage to make it outside in more dire straits than ever. Ranrock now knows exactly where the final repository is located, and is hungrier than ever to tap into its power. But, you know what? I think I'll wait. I'm going to see what Poppy's been up to. She's discovered where we can encounter the centaurs and give them our pitch to help out the Snidges. It's just too bad that they are entirely unreceptive to the olive branch, save for one who goes against the grain. We make our pitch to this lone thinker, and he gives us a cryptic hint as to where we may be able to find what we seek. It's not very helpful, and it's going to require yet more research, so we split with Poppy as she goes off to look into it. In the meantime, unbelievably might I add, Sebastian's gotten himself into hot water again, as we get an owl from Ominous, who says that he's gone into the catacomb alone. We fly there to find both Ominous and Anne freaking out, and as we investigate the tomb, it is now filled with the walking dead. We fight back the undead masses, eventually finding Sebastian in the center of it all. He's becoming corrupted by the power of the relic. Seems to think he's controlling the Inferi, that if he can just get a little more control over dark magic, then he'll be able to understand it and lift the curse from his sister. I think he's just becoming delusional, as does Solomon, who appears out of nowhere to take and destroy the cursed object. A familial battle ensues, which somehow we get pulled into, ending in a turn of events befitting this sad, strange tale.
I won't let her suffer! Avada Kedavra!
Yep, Sebastian Avada's his Kedavra. Anne arriving moments later to destroy Salazar Slytherin's ancient spellbook and take the corpse of her newly deceased uncle, the disgust for her brother written plainly on her ailing face. Sebastian's single-mindedness destroying the only relationship that he seemed to truly value, his inability to accept Anne's future, leading to him no longer being welcome in it. Distraught, he flees the catacomb, stopping only once he's at the entrance, his angry mind attempting to piece together a narrative where his uncle's death isn't laid at his feet. A story where the killing curse was his only option in the moment, a task he wants to be left alone to attempt. Well, that was nice and depressing, eh? Bleeds right in perfectly with what Poppy's got going on. Since our last interaction, she's been poring over research, attempting to pinpoint the cave that the centaur, Doran, told us about. We enter it to find... frogs? No, this can't be right. It was my understanding that the only beings that could exist within caverns were spiders and goblins. Still, plenty of puzzles though. We best them all with our brilliant wizard mind, and in the end we are rewarded with the Moonstone. Poppy's so excited, she doesn't even want to stop for research. As we immediately go to the next location, we're supposed to use the stone at to find that it makes mooncalves dance. Not exactly the snidgets I'm searching for, but okay. Poppy is absolutely thrilled with the wondrous jive and takes this opportunity to open up to us. She tells us that the reason she's so dedicated to the conservation of these magical creatures is that she was raised in a poacher camp, her parents still continuing that lifestyle to this day. It's a pretty amazing revelation to show that Poppy really trusts us, as the only people who knew previously were her and her grandmother. With the weight of her past off her chest, Poppy theorizes that the unique pattern of the mooncalf dance may in fact be some sort of map. She makes note of it and plans to take it to Doran to see what he thinks. As for us, we've got more Sebastian drama to deal with. We go to meet him in the Undercroft, where he and Ominous seem to be having a similar conversation to what we had outside of the catacomb.
Sebastian, Anne can't bear the thought of turning you in, but...
What? Turn me in? She saw what happened.
Sebastian is still attempting to wrap his mind around the idea that he may be the bad guy here. We attempt to nudge him to that conclusion, and he begins to relent, but now comes the hard part. Anne is torn on whether to report her brother for the evil he's committed, and in her uncertainty, she's turned to Ominous. And Ominous has turned to us.
I don't want to lose Sebastian, but I don't think we have a choice.
Oh, come on, man. Don't put this on me. It's a tough call, but that green blood runs thick. And Solomon, well, he was kind of a prick.
We do have a choice. What good will it do to turn him in now? He clearly regrets everything.
Ominous agrees with our point of view, and I do not feel good about it. Please, for the love of God, let me drown my moral failures in the main questline. We return to the map chamber to find Fig talking to all his friends. We interrupt to catch the good professor up on what's been going on, and due to the severity of the situation, Bakar decides that perhaps this should be condensed to a 1-month waiting period. He informs us of where to find the trial, and we head there to find that we have to tackle with a graphorn. Fig tells us that he happens to know of one nested nearby, and we head off to face the Lord of the Shore. He's tough, He's a higher level than me, he takes damage like a brick wall, and he hits like a semi-truck. Fortunately, I'm living limitless lives here, and in one of them we managed to capture it, riding it all the way back to the trial, which grants us access to the final pensive memory. In this one, we follow Professor Bakar as he goes off to the Morganac residence in search of Isadora, only to find her father's hollow-eyed zombie body instead. Freaked out, he heads to Rackham and tells him the news, only to be told that Isadora's been using the ability on students, a revelation that brings the Four Keepers together with a new directive. They find her in a large chamber, having just sucked out the pain of a student, approaching to see a goblin silver ball filled with the emotional magic she's been gathering. She tells the collective that they're being selfish, that she seeks a world without pain. Why fight that? But they don't listen, and she's through trying to convince them. A scuffle ensues, with Isadora quickly getting the upper hand, but Bakar must have been going to the same classes as Sebastian.
Avada Kedavra!
He ends Isadora with the use of the Killing Curse, putting a stop to her reign of emotional terror and giving us a full picture of what happened to this disturbed young prodigy. With this understanding, we return to the map chamber to discuss our options moving forward. Rackham tells us that the ancient magic is sealed deep below Hogwarts, and that, to get it, we'll need to craft a special wand using the artifacts found above the pensives. Fig also decides that perhaps it's time to actually tell Professor Weasley and the other teachers that we're going to have some goblin visitors in the very near future. However, before the final battle commences, we need to ensure the safety of the Snidgets. We find Poppy conversing with Doran, who tells us that he thinks he recognizes the symbol created by the Mooncalf dance. Agreeing to take us there, we arrive to find a puzzle which opens up an old ruin. We enter as Doran leaves to speak with his herd. Inside, we find a few puzzles before being ambushed by poachers in a large room. Descending on us in droves, we fight them off one by one, but the forces are so many that it almost seems insurmountable. That is, until on man-horse hooves rides our reinforcements. With Doran's help, we manage to fight off the onslaught of poachers, thanking the centaurs for their aid as we enter a room to find the Snidgets. They seem to be frozen in some kind of spell, which we destroy to watch the little golden balls with eyes hatch.
Merlin, they're lovely.
We've done it. We've saved the Snidgets from extinction with the help of a friend. Doran promising that he and the other centaurs will ensure their safety from this point forward. Poppy is all smiles, staying behind to adore the little devils, but we've got a wizarding world to save, ladies and gentlemen. With the need for a new wand, we head to the greatest wandsmith around, Ollivander's, to see what he can come up with. Of course, he does not disappoint, but the wand is only useful in the circumstance of accessing the recesses of the school. Unfortunately, though, as we leave the shop, we run into an unexpected guest. Rookwood attempts to play nice, offering to cut us in on the ancient magical power, trying to rope us with the mutual understanding that we can't let goblins take control of the repository. His niceties aren't quite enough, however, and so he resorts to his old reliable playbook of attempting to beat us into submission. He nabs us from Hogsmeade, apparating us to his hideout, where we are absolutely bombarded with hordes of dark wizards attempting to bring a fifth-year child down. But no matter how many spells they sling, the protagonist's blood is too strong for any Stephen Amell lookalike this universe can conjure. And in the end, we pop the sorry bastard like a balloon. With one less bad guy in the world, we make our way back to the map chamber for our final conflict with our goblin rival. We tell Fig of Rookwood's death, listen to the final speech of the Keepers telling us that this power is too great to wield, and finally find the repository entrance was just under our feet this entire time. As we enter it, though, it would appear that Ranrock's steps were just a little bit faster. Goblins and trolls have infested this cavern as we fight off dozens attempting to beat Ranrock to this ancient power. And just when it seems like their forces may overwhelm us, the reinforcements arrive. The professors from the classes we seldom attend arrive to show what we've been missing, and it is glorious. With their aid, we push past the villain masses and eventually make it to the inner sanctum of the caverns, using the wand to intimidate two enormous stone warriors who open the final door blocking the repository. We rush in to find that we've done it. We've outpaced Ranrock, and to celebrate, we have a little conversation with Fig. He asks us what we plan to do with the power of the magic locked within the Goblin Sphere. Will you embrace the power and become Isadora 2.0, or will you keep it locked away, ensuring that it cannot harm those who seek to use its evil potential? Considering what happened to Isadora, I think I'm good.
I plan to leave the repository as it is.
I'm pleased to hear that.
Fig is proud of our decisions, but unfortunately the conversation's given time for Ranrock to catch up. He arrives in the chamber with threats, showing off Miriam's wand, both confirming that he killed her and that sticks just don't make very intimidating weapons, I'm sorry. Infuriated, Fig casts the first spell, but Ranrock's looking past us, breaking the container of ancient magic and absorbing it to become a goblin silver dragon thing. He flies around the room, stopping to drop a giant rock on Professor Fig, leaving us to fight this all-powerful monstrosity alone. Fortunately, a year of adventures at Hogwarts has more than qualified us to face this all-powerful horror, and we continue to match his blows time and again as we fall deeper and deeper into the repository chamber. The fight is grueling, with many a Wiggenweld potion falling casualty, but in the end, there's only one protagonist, buddy, come on. We manage to put down Ranrock as the chamber around us begins to fall. The power contained within the repository was unstable, and as we attempt to hold it together, even our tremendous might doesn't seem to be enough. Fortunately, Fig survived the rock, aiding us in halting the collapse, but we need to reforge the repository. Somehow we just know how to do that. And with one more powerful cry, we reforge the container, but alas, the final battle has proven too much for our dear friend. And in his final moments, he thinks to his wife, and the pride he's found in us, the future.
The wizarding world could not be in more capable hands.
Fig's loss devastates the school. We get a rather unarousing speech from Headmaster Black, but luckily Weasley steps in to do him a bit more justice. The truth of our year's escapades now fully sinking in, as the consequences have come home to roost. Speaking of consequences, the speech ends with another catch-up with Sebastian. He can't believe that Fig is gone, and as if to kick him while he's down, we also inform him that it wasn't a goblin, but rather Rookwood who cursed his sister. A revelation that he really didn't need and doesn't take very well.
This can't be. It was the Loyalists. It's always been them.
Yep, you ruined your life and were wrong on who to blame. Oh, Sebastian. We take a well-deserved nap, and when we wake up, our serpent sibling wants to have one final meeting in the Undercroft. He tells us that Anne isn't going to turn him in, that he's finally come to terms with the fact that he's almost certainly lost his sister, and that his actions are to blame. We reminisce a bit, but it's clear he's a shell. At least he's willing to teach us the spell that destroyed his most cherished relationship, though. Our relationship with Sebastian having run its school year course, Poppy now wants her bookend. We meet with her in the Great Hall to discuss the newfound safety of the revived Snidgets, to reminisce about the wonderful times that we've had this year together, and Poppy opens up that we're her first real friend. We've helped her see that people can be just as good of company as the magical beast companions that she clings to. A revelation that she'll take forward with her as yet another of our school year companionships draws to a close. Natty, on the other hand, well, she sent us an owl that there's one more villain that still needs to pay his price. Theophilus Harlow is still on the loose, and she's recently gotten a suspicious owl letter that reads trap. She asks us to accompany her in checking it out, hoping to flip the table on who's trapping who. We join for one last rodeo, facing the final holdouts of the Ashwinder elite forces, dismantling every one until Harlow finally arrives on the scene. He's a tough old git, but in the end, with the help of Natty, he meets his match. His loss making him so desperate as he tosses out a Cruciatus curse our way, which Natty takes for the team.
Crucio!
Officer Singer and Professor Onai arriving on the scene to see Natty writhing in pain. Harlow being apprehended as Natty is taken to the school's medical wing. We visit her, finding her mother is close by her side, before thanking her for what she did for us. She tells us that it was instinct, a revelation that helps her get over the guilt that she's been harboring for her father doing almost the same thing for her back in Uganda. It's a touching moment as yet another of our school year companionships draws to a close.
You, my fellow traveler, have enriched my time at Hogwarts beyond anything I could have imagined. Thank you.
And with that, our time at Hogwarts has all but concluded. All that remains being the awarding of the House Cup. Unfortunately, considering we've seldom attended our classes, and one of our housemates murdered his uncle, I think we'll be sorely disappointed.
100 points to their house.
I suppose we have our winner.
I've won the House Cup.
And that, all of that, is Hogwarts Legacy. If you couldn't tell by the length of the overview, this game is enormous, and I didn't even cover most of the side content. I went over the 3 main side character quest lines, mainly because Sebastian's does kind of heavily connect with the main thread, but there's still so many things I glossed over or outright skipped. To begin with some of my thoughts on this game, before I attempt to explain the story, I thought this game was phenomenal. In my opinion, it's tailor-made for all the Potter fanatics out there, in a way that feels so well grounded within the universe. Like I said in the very beginning, I enjoy the Potter movies. I've probably watched through them collectively twice, but I'm not an avid book reader or a lore aficionado. I've always thought of the universe in which Potter is set to be the more captivating aspect of the series for people. Yes, the characters can be colorful and interesting, but even when you look at the merchandise for this series, a lot of it is tethered to the Hogwarts houses or Hogsmeade or just interesting aspects of the movies rather than the actual characters. You don't see people fighting to the death over Team Harry or Team Draco like this is Twilight. As such, the prospect of setting a game in this world seems so rife with possibilities, and I think they nailed it. You feel like you're in this environment. You get to explore iconic places like the common rooms, the Great Hall, the classrooms, or even Hogsmeade. You get to see students getting chewed out by howlers, watch ghosts float about carefree, see portraits go about their business, and watch house elves care for the grounds.
Nearly dusted Nick. Poor Sir Nicholas, nearly headless, and also nearly dusted, and never cared for or...
Yes, no need to dwell.
There is so much of this world being brought to life in a way that can only really be appreciated in something like a video game, where you're interacting with these halls and getting to follow the appearing staircases. They did an excellent job of bringing Hogwarts to life, and I can only imagine if I were a bigger Potterhead, I'd get even more out of some of the references and lore hints. For me, the realization of the castle is the highlight, but that's not to say that it's the only thing to be praised. Characters are interesting, they have backstories, lives that brought them to Hogwarts, and you can learn about them through things like the documents scattered around the castle grounds or just by talking to them. You can learn about Professor Kagawa's Quidditch backstory, hear about Hecate's former role within the Ministry of Magic. Even lesser characters of importance, like Professor Shaw, have a story to tell.
My sister is a squib. Clever, hardworking, and generous, but a squib nonetheless.
There's so much here to envelop yourself into, be that story-related or gameplay. Hogwarts Legacy has so many gameplay functions. To be honest, it's a bit overwhelming at times. When we're 3/4 of the way through the story and still picking up new things to do, it can feel a bit much. Spellcasting is great. You have your standard attacks, your heavy attacks on a meter, and then you have your specials which work on timers. You've also got your spells for combat, like Confringo, and spells for puzzle solving like Wingardium Leviosa. Then spells that can be used in both scenarios, like your standard Leviosa. But when you get to the non-essentials outside of combat, there's just so much to do. You've got star puzzles, field guide pages, Merlin trials, the Room of Requirement, broom riding challenges, beast catching magic, potions, herbology, animal breeding, clothing enhancements. What you want to do in this game, I'll be damned if you can't do it. If you're avidly playing this game, parsing it out over the span of like a month, then this is perhaps perfect. There's so much depth for what you may enjoy, be that the beast management aspects of the game or just simple exploration. But if you're taking gaps, oh buddy, I can't imagine you taking gaps. I feel like if I stopped playing this game for a week, I wouldn't remember what the hell I was doing. It took me post-game to realize that you needed Lumos to solve this Merlin trial type. Is that a negative? Well, it depends on the time on your hands and your interests. To me, the time spent learning the Room of Requirement was overwhelming and not very enjoyable. I'm not the person who's going to customize the portraits on the walls of a game like this, so it felt unnecessary. But I do respect the fact that it's an option. I just wish learning it was more of an elective. Another shortfall of this game is that I don't feel like the characters are fully realized. We can dig into their backstories, which is very interesting, but we don't often get to actually impact their journeys, nor do they truly impact ours. This is in part a virtue of the sheer number of characters, but even some of the more important ones are just kind of periphery to the journey we're having, to the point where they seem almost superfluous. For example, Headmaster Black is almost an entirely unnecessary character. He's kind of comic relief, I guess, but his existence only serves as a minor obstacle to be immediately overcome. You replace him with Professor Weasley, and the game loses no real stride. These characters are basically just window dressing, which is good for a pass in the hall or a light conversation, but it does dip believability at times. This kind of surface-level examination of things is also something that I found to plague the main storyline. For another example, when you play this game, it's not really set that you have very much player choice. Sure, you can answer an NPC differently, but I think that you're going to arrive at the same conclusion regardless of what you say. So I'm not quite sure what the point was of creating a questionable dichotomy between Isidore and the Keepers. By that I mean, why does the game at times attempt to get you to see things from Isidore's perspective, when it's clear she's just lusting for power and all hopped up on emotions by the end? It's not like we can shake off the Keepers and become her disciple, so why suggest that it's an option? I also think that the concept of this ancient emotional magic is a bit too vague. The Keepers speak of this secret with such weight, but in the end, it amounts to no player-observed buffs. It's all just a theoretical concept of how powerful Ranrock became, despite the fact that we beat him with no such power. These are issues that you probably won't care about if you're not looking at this game too critically, but they are issues that held me back from really resonating with it. As for some of the other characters, Ranrock's story is interesting, but I think we needed more interactions with him to build him as this great threat the story wanted to sell him as. Rookwood had similar issues, and we needed to get more of his backstory since his connections to his Keeper ancestors were basically ignored. Lodgok, on the other hand, I think served his purpose well. He's basically the stone to ensure the player knows that there are still good goblins in the world. Then, to get into the main students, Natty is probably the weakest in my opinion. Her story is interesting. She's a transfer student after her father died in Uganda, and she's attempting to rectify her feelings about that by hunting down and bringing Harlow to justice, whom she sees as analogous to her father's murderers. Her father jumped in front of a killing curse to save her, and she feels responsible for that, which makes her realize that it wasn't her fault when she does the same thing to save us in the end. I think the actual story is there to make her a memorable character, but her questline unfortunately fails her. There's not enough memorable points in it that I feel like I'll remember her in the future. After that, I think that Poppy was a bit stronger, if not just because she arguably had the most memorable events. Saving the dragon from the poacher's tent, meeting the centaurs and almost getting killed by them, even rescuing the Snidgets are all very big moments that make her questline memorable. As for her actual character, her story isn't as engaging to me as Natty's, but probably more relatable. She's found solace in her connections with magical beasts, perhaps out of shame for her past upbringing in the poacher lifestyle that keeps her at a distance from her classmates. When we help her in Howland's class, she sees a kindred spirit, and through us, she manages to break the shackles of her past and blossom into a more sociable and trusting person. Then we have Sebastian, easily the most fleshed out and explored character in this entire game. His is a cautionary tale of the dangers of dark magic, not only for his desire to learn it, but for the effects that it has on Anne. The Sebastian questline had the only moments where I truly felt a conversational decision give me pause. I genuinely tried to halt the brakes on our serpent siblings' crazy train in the end, not knowing if it was possible to actually change how the events played out. Then, when he inevitably kills Solomon, I sat on the decision to turn him in for probably 30 seconds to a minute, not knowing what to pick.
They did a very good job reeling us into Sebastian with his eagerness to help and his selflessly taking the blame in the library, then turning the screws when he started to descend into single-mindedness. It was even a nice twist when he found out about Lodgok, and it was like he flipped a switch about whether he could trust us anymore, if we were so foolish as to break bread with the enemy that caused him such grief.
Reflecting on it, I don't know that I'd change anything about this story, other than perhaps more time with Anne, so that we could have more stakes in it.
When I think back on this game, I'll think back on this questline. May even come a point when I mistake this one for the main plot because I think it's more interesting.
And speaking of the main plot, let's try to decipher what I think can be a pretty confusing storyline.
So to start as far back as we can, Isadora Morganach was born into the hamlet of Feldcroft sometime during the Tudor era. At the time, a drought had been devastating the local community until a group of witches and wizards from a local school came and solved the issue in an instant. Isadora witnessed the impressive display of magical prowess from a talented wizard named Percival Rackham, and in his magic, she noted strange wisps of power she didn't recognize and her family couldn't see. As she grew, her brother would die, shattering her father, and she would eventually become emboldened with magical power, becoming so impressive that she would be inducted into Hogwarts as a 5th year, a rare feat that we only know to have occurred twice, once with Rackham and once with ourselves many years later.
I don't think it's really explained why students who enter the school in the 5th year have this ability to see this ancient magic.
I would assume it's tied to magical ability not showing itself until later in that person's life, and thus they're perhaps believed to be a squib or just not meet the threshold of magical talent to attend a school until that point. I suppose that would be the implication that we're meant to infer, but regardless, she would be enrolled and would meet and idolize the teachers that helped her and her family when she was younger. Rackham would take her under his wing, since he also knew how to use this ancient magic, and under his tutelage she would flourish. However, even then, her thoughts were of the pain that her father was still bearing over the loss of his beloved son. Rackham would attempt to steer her from this path, but after her graduation from the school, she would begin digging into ancient dark magic surrounding the taking of pain, and eventually she would find something promising. She would return to Hogwarts sometime later, becoming a professor, the people she once looked up to, now her peers, and she wanted to show them what she'd learned on her travels. This would lead to the dinner scene and to her removing the pain from her father. The others were shocked, unsure of what to do, but saw her spell as dangerous, an uncertainty that only grew as she began to get some kind of satisfaction from inhaling this pain. The other professors were becoming wary of her, and Isadora could see the writing on the wall that they disapproved. However, she still believed that she was helping people, that perhaps they couldn't see it, but it would be clear to someone else. She would search for another with the ability to wield ancient magic, but find no one, eventually resigning to the fact that she may no longer be alive to see the fruits of this labor, and so she would need a way to store this power. She would turn to a goblin named Bragbor the Boastful for this, commissioning him to build a goblin silver sphere where she could keep this magic, amassing as much of it as possible before she would eventually meet her end at the hands of San Makar. The great power held within the sphere becoming a secret between the 4 professors as they took on the moniker of the Keepers, locking the repositories away and creating trials to prove that only one who was worthy in their eyes would ever find them. Essentially, they would show a future person who had these ancient magical abilities the story of Isadora Morganach as a cautionary tale of this power's dangers. As part of their creed, they would presumably obliviate everyone involved in the fiasco, from the students who had their pain taken, to Bragbor the Boastful and whoever else helped him build these repositories. But unbeknownst to them, Bragbor had kept journals.
Bragbor's journals essentially being the crux that ties the story of the Keepers with Ranrock's modern-day rebellion.
So to now pick up with Ranrock, we know very little about his life before becoming the Goblin Lord. The only small detail the game really even gives us, coming from a side quest you could easily overlook, in which you find this Hufflepuff girl's uncle who's been kidnapped after attempting to trade with Ranrock's men. He can speak gobbledygook and overhears some of the goblins speaking about their boss's life before he was, their boss.
Although dragon breeding was outlawed by the Warlocks Convention of 1709, Ranrock stumbled upon an illegal dragon camp. He was young, found the creatures fascinating. He'd visit the camp in secret whenever he could, never making his presence known. After weeks of sly surveillance, he finally summoned the courage to speak to the wizard in charge. Ranrock wanted to join them, and the creatures. The wizard happened to drop his wand. Ranrock saw an opportunity. He picked it up, went to hand it back as a means of introducing himself. The sight of a goblin with a wand sent the wizard into an instant rage. He beat Ranrock nearly to death. Ever since, Ranrock has despised wizard kind, sees us all as cruel.
This event would be the spark for Ranrock's rebellion, and as it so turned out, he was an ancestor of Bragbor the Boastful, so he had knowledge of these ancient journals. And in a kind of interesting turn of lore, he actually might have believed them to belong to him and his family due to how the goblins view property rights.
Goblins believe that the rightful owner of any object is its maker, not its purchaser.
Wizard kind see things differently.
Since Bragbor had created these repositories, they were technically his according to goblin tradition. Which, I don't know, I just found to be an interesting side note. Anyway, with the journals, he would begin recruiting goblins from all over who felt like they'd been treated as inferiors for too long. He would also rope in Lodgok, but presumably Lodgok never fully trusted him because he would never hand over the most important of Bragbor's journals to his brother. Based on the volumes that Ranrock had, he only knew the names of the keepers, and so he was kind of canvassing locations near where they lived to try and get lucky. He would have success at the Rookwood Castle, and in the process make a shaky alliance with Victor. Victor ran a fairly well-known criminal syndicate, so he was a powerful ally, but Ranrock was only interested in him as a way to get to his repository and exploit any knowledge he may have of Charles Rookwood, his ancestor. Victor, on the other hand, wanted the ancient magical power of the repositories, but he couldn't wield it, so he needed Ranrock for that. Although he obviously had plans to backstab him at the first sign of an issue.
Avada-kedavra!
Which basically leads to our prominence in the universe. We're the first 5th-year Hogwarts student with the ability to see ancient magic in centuries, and we just so happen to arrive at a time where that is desperately important. As for our backstory though, it's as blank as a sheet of parchment paper. The events of the game are the events of our life. Our character being an avatar to put yourself into, rather than a character, which is presumably for the best anyway.
But yeah, that's the main storyline in a nutshell.
Or at least what led to the events of the game and isn't explicitly spelled out for you during the course of the adventure.
Of course, there's like a million things we could go over.
Headmaster Black's cancellation of Quidditch because a pureblood got injured in the previous season. The Minister of Magic, Ferris Spavin, and the fact that he, much like Cornelius Fudge, seems entirely inept at his job. Sebastian's Uncle Solomon, and his interesting discharge from being an Auror for supposedly using dark magic himself. So many tiny threads to pull, but I think we've covered the blanket. According to How Long to Beat, this game's main storyline alone is about 26 hours, with another 40 plus hours of side content, so I mean, I'm missing some stuff, but I hope I got the biggies. As for the future of the series, as I said in the beginning, this thing was a smash hit, so of course we're getting a sequel, which was confirmed and is also supposedly going to tie into the HBO Harry Potter series somehow. I don't know that I like that, depends on what the ties are, but it seems like unnecessary cross-promotion. Then there are also rumors of a 10 to 15 hour DLC coming out, potentially soon, but these are just rumors, nothing official.
Anyway, that's about all I've got to say for Hogwarts Legacy, extensive as it was. Thank you all for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all in the next one.